literature refers to works that were produced in England from about the fall of Rome, which was the late 400s CE, to the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, around 1476. This was a time of war and physical violence. There are many different influences from medieval literature that have shaped our current English writing to what it is today. Many famous authors emerged from this period with famous works of literary art. There were two main types of writing during this time. The first one is religious, and the second is secular. Religious writing was the most dominant writing found in libraries during the medieval literature movement. The majority of this writing was produced by clerics. Hagiographies, which were known as the Lives of the Saints, were frequently written to encourage some and to warn others. Goliardic poetry was also a main form of religious writing during this time. It was well known as having many satiric verses within it. Secular writing was non-religious. It was very popular during this time, and a lot of it has made its way into our modern writing. The subject of courtly love was very popular in this type of writing. Other types of writing under this category are Roman courtice, which emphasizes love and chivalry rather than acts of war, as well as political poetry and Goliardic poetry. Women's literature was another popular form of writing during this time. During this time, women were not equal to men, and women could use writing to gain fame. Women's literature was mostly religious and written by nuns. Another type of writing was called allegory, which is a story within a hidden meaning. Feudalism is a type of government where one person has the power instead of many. Feudalism was based on the belief that land belonged to God. It was like a big hierarchy, because there was a king or lord in power that owned all of the land. People got the land in exchange for services or fees. It was a process of land being handed down through the lower classes. The process was called sub-infeudation. It continued to repeat until it got to a fief, which was a land or service which could only support one warrior. Another political fact was that sometimes the vassals had more power than the kings. Three well-known rulers during this time were King Arthur, Richard the Lionheart, and Edward the Confessor.
Writing was written in manuscripts, which means it was written by hand. The dominant writing language was Latin. People wrote literature on vellum, which is animal skin. Literate men and women who were taught to reproduce books were called scribes. A lot of medieval literature is anonymous, somewhat due to the lack of documentation, but mostly due to the author's role back then. That is much different from the romantic interpretation of the term used today. Individual author names were not important. This is because they were mostly retelling stories they had already heard. They respected those who told them the stories and didn't want to take credit for their work. They hardly ever invented new stories. Satiric literature is literature that makes fun of society. It shows what society is supposed to be like versus what it actually is. Indirect characterization is the process by which the personality of a fictitious character is revealed through the character's speech, actions, appearance, and more. Courtly love is a concept that focused on what a knight should be, including courtesy and generosity. It also includes gestures used to win over a girl. Chivalry is the qualifications of a knight.
Geoffrey Chaucer was born in London in 1343. He was known as the father of literature and was considered to be one of the greatest English poets of the Middle Ages. He was best known for the Canterbury Tales, which is considered one of the most poetic works in English. He was an author, philosopher, alchemist, and astronomer. He was also a crucial figure in developing literature written in English, when the majority during that time was written in French and Latin. Chaucer was also the first to ever be buried in Westminster Abbey's Poets' Corner. Two of his most famous quotes are, "The greatest scholars are not usually the wisest people, and we know little of the things for which we pray." Thomas Malory was born in 1405 in the United Kingdom. He was an English writer best known for Les Morts d'Arthur. Since the late 19th century, he has generally been identified as Sir Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel, in Warwickshire. He was a knight, landowner, and member of Parliament. Most of what we know about him stems from the description of him in the prayers found in the Winchester manuscript. One of his most famous quotes was, "For as well as I have loved thee heretofore, mine heart will not serve now to see thee, for thou they, and me is the flower of kings and knights destroyed." The Le Morte d'Arthur, written by Thomas Malory, was published in 1485. The story was of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, beginning with Arthur's conception and birth, and concluding with his death by the hands of his own son. William Caxton was born in 1422. He was a merchant turned writer and set up the first printing press in England in 1476. As a publisher, he produced over 90 editions of well-known and lesser-known authors, including Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Miles Coverdale was born in Yorkshire in 1488. He was the main translator of the Bible in the 16th century. Much of his life, he lived and worked in Germany, producing the first complete Bible to be printed in English around 1535. He also worked with others on the Great Bible of 1539. Jacobus de Voragine was born in Pesaro, Italy around 1230. He was the highest bishop of Genoa and wrote mostly about saints. He wrote the Golden Legend, which reached such popularity that in its time it was reported read more often than the Bible. The Golden Legend contains 900 manuscripts. It was mainly about the lives of saints, both fiction and nonfiction. It was written around 1260, and it also showed a lot about church and life back in medieval ages. During the medieval daily life, the day begins at sunrise. Everyone attends Mass at the chapel. Knights replace the night guards. Peasants begin chores and meals. Breakfast was typically bread and wine, which was very small, and then all began their daily routine. The Lord would attend meetings discussing diplomacy, trade, warfare, legal, and financial matters. The ladies would talk about personal hobbies. Knights were training martial arts and fencing. Children learned many subjects, but mainly religion. And peasants began their daily assignments, work, which was things like caring for horses, cooking, and other things. Dinner was the most important meal, which was served at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., and after dinner there were 2 more small suppers. This was looked at to be a common dinner in the medieval ages.
As stated before, dinner was the most important meal. It was served between 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. It began with prayer because religion was very important during this time. Food includes pork, beef, beans, peas, apples, and pears. Well-off castles also had sugar, rice, almonds, raisins, pomegranates, and more. Dinnertime entertainment included jokes, stories, music sung by minstrels, and harp players.
Which story shall we tell today?
Canterbury Tales!
The Canterbury Tales tell the story of a group of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. They engage in a tale-telling contest to pass the time. During the story, you watch the interactions between the characters, as well as reading 24 of the tales.
There were many classes in the medieval time frame. Some include nobles, peasantry, and clergy. The nobles mainly included primary fighters and honored society. Peasantry included the workers. This includes cooks, farmers, servants, cleaners, and more. Clergy was primary hired churchmen and people working with or for the church. This is important to note because most of the literature at this time was written by clerics.
Medieval literature has influenced modern-day popular culture in so many different ways. Pretty much any TV show or movie that contains sword fights or sorcery ultimately descends from this period. One example that is more subtle is the Twilight series. The overwrought, delayed, and frustrated desire between Bella and Edward slightly shouts courtly love, which is one of the most common themes in the medieval literature. Plus, there is also the whole connection of Jacob and the Buscare, which was a chapter in Marie de France's Lais, which was about a man with a werewolf curse. A few other movie examples would be The Hobbit and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There are probably about 100 different TV shows that have been created and canceled throughout the years that either take place during the Middle Ages or are highly influenced by them. Some more current examples are Excalibur, Merlin, and King Arthur. Many major things we have in society today that were created in the Middle Ages include colleges and universities. The first two universities were the University of Bologna and the University of Paris. They are both founded in the late 11th century. Another thing was banking, and bills in exchange were invented, as well as illustrated books, romantic love, chivalry, corrective eyewear, mechanical clocks, and the compass were inventions during the Middle Ages, as well as the Magna Carta of 1215. This was when the king must govern with consent and the king must govern within the law. This laid the foundation of modern Western liberal democracy.